Hello, and welcome to my video on Palworld and what I interpreted as its inspiration and references to folklore and mythos. This game is still in early access, and understandably, the developers are focusing on polishing up the game itself before clarifying the story. There is, however, quite a deep base of content for us to explore and, more importantly to today, theorize about the world around us. And it's with this goal in mind I'm here to talk with you all again. First, I would like to make a correction. In the last video, I made mention of two statues engaged in a fight being both Palladius. These are in fact a Palladius and an Acromus, evidenced by one wielding a shield while the other has two spears. While I suggested that two different pals may mean a war between two more distinct factions, considering the lore states that Acromus was once one with Palladius, it's almost even more plausible in my mind that there was some sort of schism or civil war between a larger faction. As a point of clarity before we begin, I am not a scholar, by any stretch of the definition. No fancy papers framed on my wall, just someone who loves stories and knows not to use Wikipedia as a primary source, most of the time. I did my best to look up pronunciations and to treat the stories with respect. It's important to remember that these aren't just storybooks. These are people's real culture and heritage. Since we don't have too much in the way of concrete lore outside the memos and PAL deck entries, I'll mostly be focusing on the PALs themselves for this video, with one exception at the end. Let's begin. Leaf Monk. Leaf is a reference to one of the two humans who were destined to survive Ragnarok, an event known as the Twilight of the Gods. Leaf and her lover managed to outlast the numerous destructive events by hiding in a woods, or potentially, the world tree Yggdrasil itself. Monk is also an older Germanic spelling of monk, further pointing to the Norse connection for leaf. Foxsparks. Lapland, Finland, has legends of a mystical fire fox that causes the northern lights. It's said to do this inadvertently through its fiery tail, much how Foxsparks is said to be unable to control its own fire. Joltog. Potentially based on the mythos of the Raiju, the beast companion of the lightning god Raijin. Said to take many numerous forms, it is also said that a tree split by lightning were attributed to Raiju's claw while leaping from perch to perch. Gobfin. Another more generic creature that shares so many similarities across cultures that it's hard to pin down. Most ancient cultures had creatures described as goblins, with plenty of them being aquatic-based. My personal favorites are the Slavic Vodyanoi and the Chinese Wuchichi. Vodyanoi has a few more tricks than our Gobfin, like shape-shifting, and Wuchichi being a malevolent water demon, but they all share in their passion for attacking people when they feel like it. Eikthyrdir. The name Eikthyrdir is a homophone for the Norse mythological creature of Eikthyrnir. This mystical stag lives over top Valhalla, where it chews on the branches of the great tree of life, while the dew that falls from its antlers feeds the wellspring for all rivers in Norse legend. As in Palworld, the antlers are an important symbol, signifying the essence of life and nature. Robinquill. May be loosely related to the fables concerning fairies and their victims. Robinquill is said to be similar to humans and may even be a clue to how pals diverged from humans long ago. Fairies were often known to entice or trick their victims into becoming entities of the forest, even turning on their fellow humans. It's worth noting that the wording in PAL deck makes it seem, as a matter of fact, that pals descended from humans at some point. Grintail. A seeming reference to a Cheshire cat, there is surprisingly a relative short history to the creature. The first known use of the term started popping up in the late 1700s, and they already had the idea of a great big grin built into the story. It's surprising that with such a recent creation, there is no finite origin for the creature, but a common story is that a dairy farm in Cheshire used to case its cheese in a mold styled to look like a grinning cat. People were said to cut from the tail end first, ultimately leaving just the smiling face of the cat. Outside of the Cheshire similarities, it also seems to share traits with the famous cat bus of the Totoro fame, a Bakaneko, as well as the more distinct two tails of the Nekomata, the Nekomata being a more malevolent version of the Bakaneko. Ndatsi. There may be a loose connection to the tale around lightning strikes in what is now known as the Niger region. A paper writes about a legend telling of evil sorcerers who travel within the clouds and would destroy homes, as well as causing other ailments. The people of the villages began gathering at the beginning of the rain season to prepare a special meal that everyone shared in while they rebonded with their fellow villagers. This may be extrapolated a bit to Datsi's Paldeck entry, describing her as kind at first, but then liable to call down devastating lightning strikes. Moraith. In Palworld, this creature is attracted to the particular smell that something gives off before it dies. There are many creatures across the global history of mythology that act as heralds of impending death. I couldn't possibly make an entire list here, but I did note a couple with similarities to our Moraith. Crows and ravens appear in many legends, for as many different reasons, but one of their jobs is often seen as being omens of ill fortune or death. Though often thought of as jet black, these birds can carry some hidden coloration in their feathers, a stunning bluish green that may be nodded to in the wings of the Moraith. There is also the Celtic story of the Black Shuck, or the Welsh Cún Annwn, different in their own right, but both ethereal dogs that travel at night, much as Moraith. To see, or even indeed to hear them, was said to be an omen of your death. Lindworm. Most probably based off the folklore behind the Urteki, or dragon flute. Though examples exist of being made with modern materials throughout time, story tells that traditionally these flutes were made from various bird bones. There seems to be many variations on the story, but the flute is generally meant to depict the roar of the dragon, spreading through the mountains, or indeed, the dragon itself. Bushi. This could be an allusion to the overall concept of Bushido, a morality code that prevailed in historic Japan, though elements can still be found in modern practices. Roughly translated, it comes to the way of the warrior, in different eras held moderately different values. It could also be a more direct reference to what is known as Bushi Katagi, roughly translated as a noble or elevated warrior. These references are illustrated by the Bushi's expertise in battle through their partner skill, a particular type of sword form known as Iajitsu. But Bushi further exemplifies the gentleman warrior in other ways, by fulfilling multiple roles at your base, some even at a more elevated level than other specialized pals. They are not just some mindless killers, they are an integral part of your group. Catris and Wixen. There are two common tropes here. Cats are traditionally associated with witches, and Catris seems to be a dark magic user with a sort of wide brim, pointy hat. The other trope sees the eternal struggle between cats and dogs, though admittedly a fox is a bit of a stretch. Much how many stories that contain witches often contain the dichotomy of an evil versus good witch, Catris and Wixen stand opposed to each other. Memorist. This large and hulking unit of a pal is actually possible to be the first creature some players will see in the game. This pal would seem to be a reference to the world elephant of Hindu mythos. On the back of a turtle are 4 elephants, each staged in the 4 directions of the underworld, supporting the weight of the world. These grand and majestic creatures literally hold life on their backs, much like the verdant garden the Paldeck describes on the back of the Memorist. Wumbo. Wumbo is a clear reference to the great Himalayan Yeti, as well as the many mountainous abominable snow hulks from around the world. Its partner skill is called Guardian of the Snowy Mountain, and Yetis too were often seen as protectors of the sacred region. Furthering their relation with the more cryptid side of things, the Paldec describes researchers once shaving a Wumpo, only to be left with nothing but hair. Literally, nothing else, as if that was the creature. Blazimet. This fiery pal may be a reference to the Chinese dragon known as Fu Sanglong, both having been said to be born from the eruption of a volcano. Fu Sanglong is described as being of the volcanoes as well as the god of crafting. Much like Fu Sanglong, Blazimet has incredibly high skill levels in kindling and mining. Helzephyr. Helzephyr may be a loose interpretation of the Aztec god Xolotl, being the god of lightning, fire, and death. While Xolotl was distinctly a canine, and their brother Quetzalcoatl was famously the bird, Xolotl was a guide to an underworld, Mictlan, and our friend Helzephyr's Paldec entry assures us that its lightning strikes are born from hell, and the resulting inferno will surely shepherd us there. Anubis. Anubis. See Anubis. Jormuntide. Jormun is a modernized spelling of a word coming from a Greek term, approximately for God, while the rest of its name seems to simply imply that it is the god of the tides. Its Paldec entry also alludes to a Greek myth of Glaucus. Glaucus was also originally born as a man, who, through misfortune, became of the sea, and by the will of Zeus, became a prophetic sea god. Palladius and Necromus. While not directly referencing any one particular mythos, these two pals seem to embody a sort of yin and yang. Palladius is described as gleaming and free from negative emotion, yet deep inside a hatred can burn, while the Necromus is described as darkened and the very embodiment of negative emotion, yet there is compassion hidden in its heart. These descriptions are an allusion to a tale almost as old as time itself, the hero's journey. Most specifically, the duality and inner turmoil locked away behind what is expected of the warrior. Frostalion and Jetragon. These two legendary pals are the deities of their own mythos. The protectors of this realm, most will go their whole lives without even hearing of their existence. But when the calamity of the past returns, they will assuredly rise to meet it. I save this last subject for the end, because it seems to be the most directly important to the story of Palworld. Between the opening cutscene informing us that the tree holds the truth, and a literally sky-enveloping tree off the coast of the northwestern island, I think it's time we talked about Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil. The world tree of Norse mythology, it is said to have connected the 9 realms, and thus is present or referenced across almost the entirety of the Eddas of Norse mythos. It is said that the tree itself was both a meeting place of the gods and home to many fantastical creatures. There is a squirrel known as Ratatoskr, whose job it is to carry messages from above to below. There were the 4 mythical stags that chewed on the limbs of the trees and gathered the dew on their antlers to form rivers. There are others, but I must make sure I make mention of Nidhogg, the world serpent that chews on the roots of the tree. There are many interesting facets and events concerning Yggdrasil, but most notable for us here and now is how the gods were said to have gathered at the tree daily, to hold court and eat the apples of Idun, to keep them in good health and young, since they were in fact not immortal. I found this relatable to Palworld, since the environment also heavily relies on a daily cycle, as well as needing to consume food to prolong our lives. As for the gods holding court at the great tree, I guess we'll just have to wait to see what secrets the tree has for us when we get there. Thank you so much for staying for these stories. There are so many possible real-life inspirations for the strange and weird land of Palworld, I wanted to stick with the more obvious references I could find. Once we get a little more concrete evidence about the lore around us, I'll be interested in visiting some of these other instances of mythology and folklore possibly present in the game. See you next time, folks. Have a good one.